Law, therefore, is prior to and independent of political authority. It is enforced by the state, and because it is already law, it is not law because the state enforces it. The above criticism is answered by Markby, Brown, and Salmond. Austin never intended his conception to apply to all governments in all ages. The true object of Austin's analysis was scientific, not political. He is attempting to frame a theory to fit modern facts and not ancient data. The historical mindedness, says Brown, which should save us from the error of fastening a modern conception upon ancient fact, should also save us from the like error of forcing on modern fact a theory derived from or suggested by the ancient data. For the jurist who is concerned to achieve a theory of modern law, law implies a state and an organized ruling power within it. According to Salmond, primitive societies are not states in the lawyer sense of the term, and the rules which they observe may greatly resemble law. They may be the historical source from which law has developed and proceeds, but they are not themselves law. Salmond considers it to be a virtue of the imperative theory that it excludes those rules which resemble law but are not laws. Salmond supports his argument with an analogy. Ape might be in the existence prior to man, but it is not a defect of a definition of man if it excludes apes from such definition. On the other hand, it is the merit of the definition. Overemphasis on physical force and overlook morals. This is the third point. Overemphasis on physical force and overlook morals. The main defect, as pointed out by historical jurists and also by leading critics like Salmond, is that Austin lays too much emphasis on physical force and in his definition of law, and he forgets the ethical constituent that is always present in every law. To Austin, force seems to be the fundamental part in the conception of law, to the exclusion of everything else. As a matter of fact, we obey the law not because we are always conscious of a policeman at our elbow, but because it is in keeping with our own notions of what is right and what is wrong. Salmond puts this with his characteristic emphasis is when he says law is not right alone or might alone, but the perfect union of the two. It is justice speaking to man by the voice of the state. In idea, law and justice are coincident. It is for the expression and realization of justice that the law has been created, and like every other work of man's hands, it must be defined by reference to its end and purpose. Salmond considers that the imperative theory is one-sided and inadequate product of an incomplete analysis of judicial conception. It is historically inaccurate, ethically defective, and practically unrealistic. From very early time, law has been obeyed either as a divine command or as a custom of the land. In the words of Demosthenes, law is a gift of God and the decision of sages. Much of the Hindu law was never formally promulgated by sovereign authority. It was followed by as a customary law of the land. Fourth criticism. Law is not always shaped in the form of a command. It is not always true to say that law is shaped in the form of command. There are many rules of law which are merely permissive or enabling. For example, the law which says that every graduate is allowed to vote. Now, this does not mean that he is commanded to vote. It merely means that if he likes, he can exercise his franchising. Again, we often find that there are laws to which the only sanction attached is a sanction of nullity. The Wills Act, for example, says that if a person wants to make a will, he should draft it in writing, sign it, and get it attested by two witnesses. Suppose a person makes a will on a piece of paper in the shape of a letter addressed to his son. A strict adherence to Austin's definition will lead us to say that only criminal laws are laws in the proper sense of the term, for here there is a command and a section or penalty. You shall not commit theft of another's property, and if you do, you will be sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. Is the usual form of a criminal law, and to convert other laws like rules of interpretation and civil procedural law into this form is almost impossible. Fifth criticism: all commands of the sovereign are not laws. If law in a command of the sovereign then is a command of the sovereign, then according to this rule, all commands of the sovereign must be laws. Frederick Harrison points out that there are various commands of the sovereign which are merely administrative regulations or rules of service. These are not enforceable in courts of law, and they are incapable of any legal remedy. He cites the rule of the War Office, which says that in an infantry regiment a person should be above 5 feet 5 inches in height. Now such a rule were to be if such a rule were to be ignored, there is no remedy provided of in any court of law. The remedy would be in the hands of the administrative superior, and the sanctions of such a rule are not legal sanctions. Law is not what is commanded, but what is enforced. Sixth criticism: overemphasis on logic. Austin stressed heavily on logic in the solution of legal problems. By means of logic, he conceived the theory of general jurisprudence by assuming that in maturer and advanced system of Rome and England, the basic notions, conceptions, and distinctions of law are the same. Likewise, in Buckland remarks, Austin defines law with reference to sovereign, and sovereign is defined with reference to law. That is a circular reasoning for Austin. Law is law since it is made by a sovereign. The sovereign is sovereign because he makes the law. Buckland says that this circular reasoning is no reasoning at all. Judge-made law ignored. Austin did not include judge-made law in his definition of law. As a matter of fact, in the course of their duty, judges, in applying precedents and in interpreting the law, make law. Though an Austinian would say that judges act under the power delegated to them by the sovereign. Therefore, their acts are the commands of the sovereign. Nobody in modern times will deny that judges perform a creative function, and Austin's definition of law does not include it. Eighth criticism: conventions ignored. Conventions of the Constitution which operate imperatively, though not enforceable by court, shall not be called law according to Austin's definition, although they are law and are a subject matter of a study of jurisprudence. Ninth criticism: international law ignored. Austin puts international law under positive morality, and so-called law of nations consists of opinions or sentiments current among nation generally. It therefore is not law properly called. The main ingredient of law lacking in international law is sanction, but this alone will not deprive it from being called law. Now nobody will accept the international law is not law. Theory is artificial. The imperative theory of law, that law is a command of the sovereign, suggests that if the sovereign is standing just above and apart from the community giving his arbitrary commands. This view treats law as an artificial and ignores its character of spontaneous growth. This sovereign is an international part of the community or state, and his commands are the commands of the organized community. Most of the theories regarding state in modern times say that the sovereignty does not remain in the shape in which it was considered by the writers of the past ages. They say the law itself is sovereign and law is nothing but the general will of the people. Thus, it cannot be said that law is a command of the sovereign. Theory ignores constitutional law. Austin's definition of law cannot apply to constitutional law, which cannot be called the command of sovereign. As a matter of fact, it is constitutional law of a country which defines the power of various organs of the state. It cannot apply to Hindu law, etc. Austin's definition cannot apply to Hindu law, Mohammedan law, and canon law. These laws came into existence long before the state began to perform legislative function. It can be said what sovereign permits is merely their enforcement and not their creation. Importance of Austinian theory. In spite of the various criticisms leveled against Austin's theory, Salmond says that this theory of law contains an important element of truth in as much as it rightly recognizes the essential fact that civil law is the product of the state and depends for its existence on the physical force of the state exercised through the agency of judicial tribunals. Austin was first who distinguished between law and justice. Later on, all the theories have recognized this original distinction and fundamental unity of law. Even the defects of his theory have been a further enlightenment on the subject. Salmond and Gray further improved upon this theory and considerably modified the analytical positivist approach. Salmond therefore concludes that all the three elements, namely the imperative, the non-imperative, and the ethical, constitute the true theory of law. What is the place of Austinian law in the modern democratic state? Austin's theory of law does not fit in the modern democratic states which have their written constitution, because any act passed by parliament can be declared ultra vires of the constitution by the Supreme Court. Thus, the sovereignty, which according to Justice Austin is unlimited, becomes limited by the constitution. Austin stresses upon the fact as to what the law is rather than what it ought to be. The present democratic states make the law keeping in view the welfare and conveniences of their citizens, because the public cannot tolerate a dictator continuously for a long time. Since in a federal constitution there is a division of powers between the center and states, and hence the sovereignty of the state cannot be undivisible. Conclusion. On the basis of the above description, it can fairly be said that Austin's definition of law cannot be accepted fully.